Alright guys, Scrappy again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Major updates going down on the Esports World Cup last night, especially reveals on the group stages themselves. 16 teams go to the tournament, 8 teams will advance through the group stages, 2 teams per group as it used to be at the World Championship back in the day when it was 32 teams, straight down to 16. What about these groups? Which is the scariest group? There's lots of debate on this actually. Which of the top teams are most likely to be upset? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. There was some more GTA RP stuff going down last night, of course. A couple of other clips emerging from that, which were rather entertaining as always. But before we get into the Esports World Cup stuff, quickly on the World Series of Warzone Global Final. They're back at it again here. They're actually doing this one out of Vegas. Pretty sure it's not at the same venue that the World Championship for Call of Duty was at last year in 2023, but this is going to be, middle of September. Couple of days for the World Series of Warzone stuff. Of course, they ran it in London last year, not the case this year. So, London can't even get the Warzone event. To be fair, it weren't great last year compared to, like, actual CDL, CWL events. But it was at least good to have something in London, I guess. But this year, not going to be the case. That's fine. Maybe next year we'll actually get a proper CDL event there. I know that Toronto have talked about it, right? That they are considering, or at least looking at the possibilities of running events outside of Toronto because they have connections elsewhere on the planet. So, we'll see about that. I mean, look, I'm holding my hopes out, let's say, for a London event, but I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to be happening. I think I'll be holding my breath for rather a long time. Quickly on aBeZy here, because aBeZy, old school MLG guy. MLG then, of course, gets kind of absorbed into Activision. They change things around. Then he starts up Esports Engine. Then there was some drama behind the scenes with exactly how the transition went when Esports Engine was kind of absorbed in the ESL FaZe group over the last couple of years. And now aBeZy has been on what we believe is effectively a non-compete agreement when he can, in 6 months' time, which is actually earlier than I thought. I thought it was going to be like next February, next March. He can effectively re-enter the gaming space and create another production company if he so wishes. Now, I imagine that he may consider doing something like that. He's obviously talking about what he's planning to do for the next 6 months or so. The issue, I guess, might be the timing. People are saying, I'll bring aBeZy back into the Call of Duty space and he's going to, fix things up. And I'm sure that he would do a great job. The question is whether the timing works, right? Because let's say 6 months' time, at the start of next year, shall we say, it's going to be the new season of Call of Duty and everything's going to be locked in, right? The production's going to be set. Probably it's going to be outsourced again, maybe even further this time. Like even the most recent year, Esports Engine have run things, but also for the champs, OpTic have done it, right? So, it's less and less internally at the Call of Duty League. It's more and more outsourced, and that could be a good opportunity for aBeZy and whatever team he puts together again, but also, the timing might simply not work out. Just before we dive into the World Cup stuff, I did think this was kind of a remarkable statistic, really. The OpTic Texas has beaten FaZe with a grand total of 6 different rosters over the last 3 years. The crazy thing is that of all of these teams, the best team, as in the team that just won champs, is actually the team with the worst record against FaZe. They were getting slammed by FaZe this year, which is very interesting. I think that's just historically Pred on the Surge days, and it's acceptable given that he was on Surge playing FaZe, but Pred's record against FaZe is not especially good. That has continued into playing for OpTic this year, but of course OpTic did eventually beat them, and when it mattered, FaZe weren't even in contention. But it's just pretty funny to think, right, that out of all these teams, the team that really hasn't been slamming them was the team that eventually won champs. But all these other teams, FaZe lost to, right? So obviously the Scump, Shotzzy, Dashy and eBeZy team. Then when they brought Hook into the roster, of course, when Scump then retired. Then when eBeZy was gone for General, they beat them with that team at the, the Pro-Am or whatever, in the middle of the season. That happens. Then we had the, the Hook and Ghosty lineup. Even, of course, back in Vanguard as well, the Pro-Loot lineup. They beat FaZe as well. So it's like pretty crazy to think that the amount of teams that FaZe have lost to over the last couple of years from OpTic Texas, but it's not going to be OpTic Texas at the World Cup. It's going to be OpTic Gaming instead. They're representing OpTic Gaming, not OpTic Texas, and we'll see that for multiple other teams as well. Just looking at this graphic, to me, kind of reminds me a bit of the pre-CDL days. Sure, we've got Vegas, we've got Carolina, okay, Brooklyn, but that doesn't really count. We've got Seattle, we've got Toronto, we've got Boston, we've got Atlanta. So there are still some city-based stuff here, but many of these teams, and I think this will continue to be the case over the coming years, are no longer longer associating with a city. OpTic Gaming, Cloud9, G2 Esports, Team Heretics, 100 Thieves, and I expect that to continue going forward as well. Obviously, Team Falcons is the same boat, but I was just referring really to the actual Call of Duty League teams that are all in some ways connected with a city, right? Like OpTic are, of course, connected, well, it's not a city, but it's Texas. Cloud9 with New York Subliners, right? G2 with Minnesota, Rocker, Heretics with Miami, 100 Thieves with LA. But they've all decided, for various reasons, not to go down that route and instead represent a different organisation, which I think will become the norm over the coming years for multiple of these teams. These, however, are the groups. Before we discuss the groups in some detail, I wanted to just mention the 4 Challengers teams, right? Because Omit Brooklyn, that is ProLoot's team. That was the team with Cammy, Purge, Awakening, and ProLoot that were very good at the Challengers World Championship, but 3 of those guys in Cammy, Wake, and Purge have been signed to Boston. That means that ProLoot has signed a few other guys onto the team from the Houston Spartans, effectively, but that's not going to be considered like the favoured Challengers team at all. The Stallions, they are the FaZe Black team, Exceed, right, and those guys over there, and they can't represent FaZe precisely because there's another FaZe team in the tournament, right, so they're going to represent, you know, the Stallions, which is kind of like Zuma's brand. Law Gaming is the team that won the Challengers World Championship. That's Arcity's team, which is actually really interesting when it comes down to the group that they are in, playing FaZe, for example, where of course Arcity's has had some prior experience, but also Gentle Mates. Now, Gentle Mates is an organization founded by Gataga, old school CoD player, old school French player, massive, of course, personality in the French space. Now, interestingly enough, bit of trivia for you guys, if you guys aren't aware of this, Gentle Mates have a Valorant team that won last year's, effectively, challenges for Valorant in EMEA. And if you win that, you actually get to qualify up to the main league. It's called Ascension. The team that won that was Gentle Mates, and that team featured a player called Whalers, who you guys might remember was a Call of Duty player back in the day, a French player for Team Vitality and other teams such as this. He then transitioned over to Valorant, and he managed to qualify, which is a pretty cool story for this Gentle Mates organization. He still plays for them in the Pro League to the present day on Valorant, not in Call of Duty, on a very different input device. But this is the team, so the former Clutch Rain, Team War guys, Harry, Cobra, Denza, and Bance, they qualified. They are going to represent, it seems, Gentle Mates. Pretty funny because they haven't confirmed this yet. They've just basically leaked it, right? Like, Gentle Mates have not yet confirmed this is going to be their team. I assume it will be, because otherwise they wouldn't have done it. But, yeah, it's been straight up leaked out there. Now, again, they're not considered to necessarily be the strongest Challengers team, but we shall see. And obviously in Group D, the Falcons are there, right? The team that has done well in Challengers lately. They won the EMEA Elite a while ago. They got the invite here by being the best team in Middle East and Africa region, Middle East North Africa region, I believe. It's technically is, because they're the best team in that region, and Los Angeles Guerrillas pulled out, and therefore Falcons stepped in. These guys are pretty good, but the issue for them is they play FaZe round 1, which potentially is going to be a bit of a challenge, right? But these are the groups. This is Group A. OpTic, Legion, Ravens, and Omit. So I'm not expecting too much in the Challengers team here. I do believe that this is a pretty straightforward group for OpTic Gaming. They come in here with the roster that just won the World Championship. Now, I will say Ravens have been grinding for a good few days at this point, and I don't know when OpTic are going to get back into practice. I think they'll do some practice. I don't think they're going to do much. I think a lot of the top teams will just go in and say, you know what, we know what we're capable of. We're just going to go in and we're going to play our game and, you know, try and take advantage of the skill difference they have over the rest of these teams. But I do think that teams such as Ravens and also Legion, this also applies for, they've been practicing now for a few days with their roster changes. They will be pretty warmed up. They will be pretty well prepared. Will it be enough? I don't necessarily think so. The Legion team with no Johnny and Fame instead, I don't really think it moves the needle much. Maybe the team's slightly worse with Fame. I'm not so sure. I don't expect that much from them. Ravens, I actually really like the look of their roster with Beans in the team. I think they've got to be a bit careful not playing for kills a bit too much, as we saw in yesterday's scrim set. But yeah, if I had to predict, I'm saying OpTic and Ravens probably get out of this one. But I do think that it should be relatively clear-cut for OpTic, right? Because if you look at the group, it's not like they're these guys in terms of seeding were pretty weak, right? Vegas and Ravens, weak seeds of the regular season, and OpTic being in the number 1 seed, that's why they get that advantage. Group B is possibly one of the more interesting, and I think if there's a group of death, I might look at this Group B, to be honest, and I think that's probably the one that I would say is the hardest, just because Cloud9 are the Subliners. They just came second at the World Championship. Seattle Surge are pretty good. Yes, they came 8th at Champs, but the feeling was for many that actually they were better than that. Ghosty has said it, multiple other pros have said it, that no, Surge are actually legit at this tournament. They're better than they appeared, and they could well have made a significantly deeper run to maybe even top 4. So Surge, I think, are a threat. And then this new G2 team that I rather like. It's the Linz, Estriel, Accuracy, Diamondcon team, and that duo on the SMGs have been doing rather well, and maybe Lamar's going to get, you know, the Saudi buff or whatever, right? And then you've got the Gentle Mates team, which with players like Cobra and Bansons, you know, legends such as him on the team, you can maybe never count them out from pulling up a potential upset. So I like Group B. Group C, FC Black are pretty damn good. Okay, the Stallions, they're a nice team. I don't know if they're going to be good enough to beat, you know, and they're not going to be ultra. I think Heretics are pretty nice as well. The real question to me is how good Boston are going to be. This Cammy, Awakening, Snoopy and Purge team, I just don't expect it to be that good. But then again, it does come down to some degree to who's practicing the most, because Boston, that team of 4 that I just mentioned, if that goes into next year's regular season, I don't expect many results. But if they're grinding hard right now, which they need to be if they want to keep their spot for next season, because after the World Cup, if you bomb out, you can still very well get dropped. They can play, you know, as our Vegas, as our Ravens, as our G2, effectively the Minnesota Rocket. They're grinding hard, probably more than any other team right now. So that does make things rather interesting, but, you know, still got to lean probably the favourites way on this one. And then Group D, I do think this is more interesting maybe than people are giving it credit for, because people are going to say, oh, well, FaZe will top the group. Well, I think there's a few things to say on that. Firstly, will FaZe and Thieves beat Falcons, and will they beat Law? Probably yes. I think there's a bit of a storyline there in terms of whether Falcons can pull off an upset against one of those teams, or if even Arcity's roster can do some damage against FaZe, because we don't really know how good FaZe are going to be. They might just have completely chalked up the mental and they're just going to turn up there and wing it, and it's probably, you know, winging it for FaZe is still good enough to probably make the finals. But I don't think this group is going to be straightforward, because 100T, they are, of course, Los Angeles Thieves. They were really good at Champs, right? They came top 4 in the end. They outplaced Atlanta FaZe, and they beat Toronto that event. They were close with Toronto the second time around. I genuinely wonder at Champs, had Thieves played FaZe, who would have won? Would it have been FaZe? Would it have been Thieves? Well, we get to probably see it in this group, depending on the way that things go. So just to note here, this is not a single round robin group where every team plays every other team. It's a GSL style, so one team will play another team, and I think that FaZe are playing Falcons in the very first game, so I believe that it goes first versus fourth, and then second versus third, which makes a lot of sense, and then the winner of that plays the winner of the other one, right? So basically, 100T will play Law in the first round of Group D, FaZe will play Falcons. Assuming FaZe and 100T both win, then they'll play each other to determine who gets through as the first seed from Group D, and the loser will then play the winner of Falcons Law in this hypothetical world to determine who gets through as the second seed. And that's going to happen across the board, and then we are going to go from 16 teams down to 8 teams, and then run at what I believe is going to be a single elimination bracket from then to the end of the tournament, right? So very difficult to say what are the most challenging groups here. You can look at, you know, you can say D's the easiest because there's only 2 franchising teams, which is totally justifiable, but you know, there's lots of angles on this, and just the idea that FaZe are going to play Falcons round 1, and as FaZe got to say themselves, if the Saudi home crowd starts a Drazah chart, I swear I'm going to lose it, right? We've seen lots of discussion on that over the last few days, but very much interested to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Yo, Ben.
What?
I think we're gonna have to play a different map, bro. It's too many large people loading into a small map. Keeps crashing the game. No, I'm not saying names or culprits, but I think you know who they are.
I mean, yeah, definitely. We all know who they are, don't we? So just leave it there.